Well, that was Nick Clegg speaking in Sheffield just over an hour ago. Let's look in a bit more detail now about both betting and polling, because bookies are predicting that the general election will attract the highest ever levels of political betting. And here to discuss how much money voters have wagered on tomorrow's outcome is Michael Robb from the Betfair bookmakers.
And also to tell us more about the latest opinion polls is Andrew Hawkins from the organisation ComRes. He's at Westminster.
Let's talk to Michael about betting first of all. Are we looking at unprecedented levels of betting on this particular election?
We are. It's going to be by far our biggest political betting event ever, certainly in the UK. We're expecting in the region of £20 million to be bet on Betfair alone from a region of around 1,500 different betting markets. So it's the choice that punters themselves are asking for, and then the amount of money they're betting behind it that makes it such an interesting proposition.
And this is not just, presumably, betting on the winner?
No, not at all. I mean, you can bet on all 650 constituencies, you can look at voter turnout, who's going to be the Chancellor on Friday, all these kind of bets down to the, and obviously the big ones, who's going to win the majority, who's going to win the most seats. So there are a huge range of bets.
And I guess a lot of the bets are being predicated on the polls. So let's bring in Andrew Hawkins from ComRes. Just tell us actually what your latest polling is showing.
Well, we haven't published our final prediction poll yet. We'll be doing that in about an hour and a half's time. But up until now, over the last couple of days, we've seen the Conservatives sort of 7 or 8 percentage points ahead of Labour. The Liberal Democrats a bit of a way behind that. I'm not at liberty to disclose at the moment what our prediction poll is going to say, but it's been interesting watching some of the other prediction polls coming in, and it looks as if it's going to be a sort of bit of a tight squeeze for the Conservatives tomorrow. So
I mean, I know you don't want to give us the figures, but is it showing us a different picture later on tonight?
Well, I'll go into that at the time, if I may, later on. But I think on the issue of betting and of what Mike Robb has been saying, it's clear that you know, political betting is an entirely legitimate and appropriate activity, but as you say, it wouldn't. I guess two things to say about it. First of all, it would be much harder without the polls, and secondly, you know, it's interesting that in your news bulletins you report on what the polls are doing rather than what the betting markets are doing. And when you go back to the last election, the average error in vote share was less than 1%. So the two operate side by side, hand in glove, and it's right that they should do that.
True, Michael?
True and false. I mean, there's the politician's answer. No, there's definitely an element of betting tracking the polls, and I think that's been clear through the TV debates especially, because that's a new proposition that people didn't have last time. But there's also countless examples of where the betting tells a very different story to the polls, and that's the kind of interesting thing where it's at least something people should look at and consider why it's telling something that could be different.
Andrew, if a particular candidate is suddenly having a lot of money put on them and it looks like they're getting a bit of a momentum, can that actually influence the way voters are thinking?
I think it's more likely to be the other way round. That you know, what I've noticed over the course of the campaign, especially as it's been such a roller coaster with the debates, that when you do publish a poll, it does move the betting markets quite noticeably. I mean, the thing that's been really interesting as well, I think, about this election that I haven't noticed in previous ones about the betting markets, is the extent to which there's been, to use a dreadful term, granularity, that you can bet on individual constituencies of a variety that you could never have done. Sort of, you go back to the 97 election, 92 election, it just didn't exist, and the internet's brought that about, and that's really fascinating, because that's often driven by the experience of candidates and parties on the ground and activists putting money on the result in those seats, and that gives us a really much more in-depth, comprehensive idea of what's going on across the regions. Because what we do is produce a national poll that then needs to get translated into real seats across the country. So by putting the two pictures together, you can get a really accurate picture of not just vote share across the country, but how that translates into seats.
Michael, have we got some Betfair current, I was going to say tips, that's not the way we want to put it, but what are the figures that you're currently favouring?
They're telling a roughly same story to the polls. It's about a 59% chance of a hung parliament and about a 38% of a Tory majority. But they move so much. So if you go back to Saturday morning, the Tories had more than a 50% chance of a majority. So any little move, any gaffe, needless to say, moves these markets immediately. And that's one of the things with the betting. It reacts so quickly because he who is quickest wins the most money and gets the best odds. So that's one of the key things.
And you mentioned the debates earlier. Did you have an enormous surge of interest from people straight after that first debate?
Right the way through. So we had betting through the 90 minutes of each debate. And overall, we think we've taken about £500,000 more with the debates than we would have without them. And again, as Andrew was saying, the polls over the weekend definitely drove some of that betting.
Andrew, the polls haven't always got it completely right. I mean, in this election campaign, all of the polls seem to be pointing to the same sort of picture, which is a hung parliament. But is there a prospect, do you think, that on Friday we might wake up to the pollsters with egg on their faces?
There's always a chance of that, and we shouldn't be so arrogant as to think that we are infallible. But the techniques that we use have matured an awful lot since the dark experience of 1992, and it's also good that there are a number of different polling companies that compete with each other on methodology to try and get it right. So we're always trying to improve. I think one of the things that really helps is the fact, and this does differentiate us from the betting markets, that there are issues that we can go into that help inform what the likely outcome is going to be, that aren't necessarily directly related to voting intention. For example, we know from past experience that the proportion of people who say they're absolutely certain to vote usually approximates to turnout pretty well. So we can say with some confidence that turnout tomorrow is likely to be somewhere between 70 and 73%. And that's incredibly helpful. That helps inform the betting markets. It helps informs the campaigns as well.
Interesting. Yes, very interesting. Andrew Hawkins from ComRes, thank you very much.
Michael, Rob, thank you. Oddest bet? What's the oddest general election bet people can have?
There's a couple of weird ones. I think Vince Cable, second favourite to be Chancellor, having been huge odds a couple of months ago, is the strangest one I've seen. So who knows what's going to happen come Friday morning.
We shall see. Thank you very much indeed for coming in as well. Thank you.